We're live, Chair.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Learning and Skills, Friday, 11th of July, 10 o'clock start. Quite a bit to get through on our agenda, but welcome to everybody and thanks for joining us. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies.
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from councillors Carol Robinson, Lucy Roberts and Sue McNicholas.
Okay, Councillor David.
I'm afraid I'll have to leave by 12:30, Chair.
Thank you, David. Hopefully we'll be somewhere near finishing them, but thank you for updating them there. Just for information, members, many of you will know that Councillor Lucy has sadly lost her husband, has passed away after illness, and I'm sure you join with us in sending our sympathy to Lucy, and understandable that she can't join us here this morning. So thinking about you, Lucy. Very sad. Item 2 on the agenda, disclosure of interest. Not sure if anybody wants to disclose there, and I'll take item 3 at the same time, declarations of party whip. Judging on your silence, we'll move on.
I assume we don't have to disclose we're governors of individual schools, Chair?
Yeah, no, we're a dispensation in place in relation to that. But yeah,
Thank you.
just thank you for bringing that to our attention. So it just clarifies that. So yeah, no problem with anybody speaking on individual schools as governors. Item 4 on the agenda is minutes. The meeting of a 16th of June 25, the pages 5 to 16 in the pack. Any comment on those before I ask to see if they're a true and correct record?
No comment on them, Chair, but I do have a follow-up question around the health and safety issue. But I'll bring that up after.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Members, can I sign them at an appropriate time as a true and correct record of a meeting on the 16th of June?
Yep.
Yep, thank you. And a seconder. Thank you very much. All in favour, great. Gareth, do you want to raise a matter arising now?
Yeah, I was just wondering what kickback or challenge do we provide to Estin around the health and safety issues that they raise in the school inspections? I was talking to an officer recently, and I was informed that one of the issues raised was because an health and safety concern was raised because there wasn't a 2-meter fence along a stretch back and onto agricultural land, but there was a stop fence and a hedge between the school playing field and the field. And, you know, to me, that sounds like that's an appropriate deterrent to anybody, especially if the school's taking appropriate action at lunchtimes and during the morning and afternoon breaks.
Okay, it's a clarification on that. So basically, you would be contacting local authority, and the local authority would provide the challenge. Can somebody help me out with that one? Sarah and Richard have got their hands up.
I'll let Richard come in first. Sorry.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think they would just on an individual school level inspection. So if a health and safety concern is raised, and the inspectorate normally raise it with a head teacher during the course of the week, if we can address it, because perhaps the observation's inaccurate or there's not a full understanding of the situation, we will during inspection week. Sometimes that's with an officer contacting Estin back in Estin headquarters, or with the SIA in the school on the day of the feedback. More broadly than that, this is actually something that we've discussed with the inspectorate in a recent ADU meeting, Association of Directors of Education Wales, around how the local authority could be more involved in that assessment of health and safety in schools. You know, as Estin noted themselves, you know, Estin inspectors are not specialists in health and safety. So that's been raised at an ADU level as well. Sarah, do you want
Gareth?
I'll come back in after Sarah.
The only other bit that I was going to raise was the importance of the school having an appropriate risk assessment in place if there is a matter that they've already previously identified.
Yeah, but because I raised the issue with their teacher of the school I'm a governor at, and the response I've had was, because we've got the similar situation, the response I've had, well, we had a visit from the appropriate officer from the authority. We walked around the grounds, and he or she was quite happy with our position. So there seems, if that's a position from the authority, which I would fully agree with, and then Eston coming in and contradicting that, then I think we need to robust, especially as we're going to spend £1.7 million of money. Some of that, if I would think we should be questioning that on some of the individual ones before we spend any money at all.
Okay, I think we understand the theme there. I think perhaps individual schools, we need to pick that up outside the meeting if we could. And yeah, but again, it's good that the point has been raised so that we have a better understanding what's going on. Good. Anything else matters arising from the minutes? No. We move on to item 5, our work program. We've developed the work program a little bit more since our previous meeting. Are there any comments to be made on it? I was queried yesterday in relation to the small schools and the closure suggestion in Llandunum. I've agreed to take that before scrutiny after consultation. We've had a conversation, and before consultation and after consultation, we're overdoing it a little bit, so it's coming to us after consultation. We'll see how that works. If that's not work and then something else pops up along that lines, we can agree to discuss it differently at the time, but that's how it's working with this school, if everybody's in agreement. Anything else on that work program? No. Okay. Move on to item 6 on the agenda, and that's progress update against the integrated business plan priorities. Dr. Richard, I believe this is with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. So just to put some context around that, as you're aware, the Education Service has prepared an integrated business plan which responds to our ESTIN recommendations. It's an integrated business plan which includes responses to meet ESTIN's requirements of a post-inspection action plan, but it's a broader plan than simply a PIAP. There are 6 objectives in the IBP. This report focuses on Objective 2. And just to remind colleagues, Objective 2 is by September 2026, we will strengthen the quality of support and challenge to schools to improve outcomes for all POWIS learners. I'll take you through the report which has been prepared. I know colleagues will have read it in advance. But again, just to say that through scrutiny, as part of the forward work programme, we will bring successive evaluations of the different objectives as we make progress through the year. So this is the evaluation as it stands of Objective 2. So in the report, I just set out some background, just absolute clarity around the reasons for this objective, and you'll know that ESTIN noted the limited impact that we're having on improving outcomes and the weak inspection profile over time of our schools, not exclusively, but predominantly in the secondary sector. School improvement processes and their impact in POWIS were noted as being underdeveloped. That relationship between challenge and support, and how the local authority brings that challenge and support to schools, being an area which we need to focus on. ESTIN also noted weaknesses in our evaluation and our evaluation processes, not using a secure enough data base of evidence, but also not looking at the outcomes of our learners and how our support and challenge improves those outcomes. So that week accountability in our frameworks. So I've moved on in the report to outline some of the further actions which we have taken to date, and I will just talk you through that now. So 3.1, to refine school improvement systems to strengthen support and challenge. Actions taken to date, we've initiated a professional learning programme, practice exchange with Torfaen, Ceredigion, Pembrokeshire as well, since this report was written, and that's where we're learning off other authorities that have been in a similar situation that we find ourselves in. We've stressed the point before that we're not just simply transplanting wholesale practice. We are making sure that what we introduce into Powys is fit for Powys. We are reviewing the school improvement guidance with service managers and our SIAs, our school improvement advisors. And we've immediately initiated a review and strengthening of our schools causing concern. So in the summer term visits, our SIAs are in schools gathering first-hand evidence. So that involves looking at learning through lesson observations or learning walks, speaking to learners, speaking to staff, looking at books and pupil product. So we're really addressing that observation that was made around the lack of depth in the evidence that we gather from our schools. All of our schools are currently producing their school development plans, and we've asked for those to be submitted before the end of the summer term. This is a change in practice. We've previously waited until the autumn term for that, but we've brought that forward so that our teams and SIAs can work closely with schools on those development plans. Margaret, I'll just work through 3.1, and Chair, if you'd like me to take questions as we go along, I'll do that. I'll just finish this section. We've also stepped up the quality assurance processes. So me as director, heads of service, service managers are now quality assuring all reports which come from our schools, from our SIAs, and we're also dip sampling across schools as well, just to ensure that consistency in approach. So what we have learnt in terms of our support systems is that we need to reduce bureaucracy, we need to have more precise improvement planning, and we need to become more accurate in articulating the challenge offer and the support offer to our schools. So that's part of the refinement under 3.1 that we've been doing. Chair, would you like to take questions as we go along, or talk through at the end of the paper?
I know Margaret's indicating, I think probably just in the interest of time, if you conclude and then we go to questions.
Yeah, certainly. 3.2, improve the management and use of schools and education performance data. We've introduced a data matrix, a heat map, where we are gathering first-hand better information on our schools rather than waiting to be told by the inspectorate. We've delivered a member development session as part of the professional learning offer to political colleagues, and we have strengthened the schools reporting process, which you will have seen in the recent standards report. In terms of skills, develop a progressive skills strategy. We're currently working with Pembrokeshire to look at literacy, numeracy and a digital strategy, and we've established a working group of senior leaders to support us in the production of a Powys-wide strategy for skills. In terms of strengthening the impact of strategies to support disadvantaged and FSM learners, we're currently reviewing the support strategies, their impact on attendance and engagement. We've stepped up our level of monitoring and reporting within the service, and this work will be completed by the end of the summer term. The report, I move on to outline a key impact of actions, which I know colleagues will have looked at. And then the report finishes with an evaluation. Essentially, we've focused heavily on the development of a very strong IBP alignment with a CSEP. We've concentrated on clear messages and clear understanding from all of our stakeholders. We now are moving very, very firmly into that delivery space. where we need to act at pace on the things that we can act on, which we're doing, and also put in place the strategic plans and resource for the longer term aspects of the IBP. Current focus is our internal review of the Mid Wales Education Partnership to understand why that hasn't had the impact that we expect it to have in Powys, and also to develop our understanding of the characteristics of our most vulnerable learners. Chair, thank you. I think that's a broad summary of the paper. We've got officers on hand as well who are responsible for different work streams, ready to take any questions and extend the conversation. Diolch.
Thank you very much. Margaret, you were very eager. Margaret, please, on your microphone, please. Not quite there.
Right.
There we go.
Sorry. Yeah. The plan seems very good, very comprehensive in so many aspects. But my concern, as always, is the secondary are dominating things at the moment. Rightly, I understand and I appreciate it, and that has to happen with the Estin report of the authority, etc. But children start school at 4, coming 5. And I just am concerned that our systems track children adequately from that point, and that we don't, because we are focusing very clearly at the moment for lots of reasons on secondary, but that beginning and tracking those children all through is so important, and we mustn't lose that in any system. It has to be robust.
Thank you, Margaret. Anything on that, Richard?
Thank you, Chair. Eric Towns has put his hand up, Service Manager.
Yeah,
Okay.
just to pick up on our early years, it was one of the areas picked out by Estin as a strength within our education service. We've actually got our foundation learning support who've delivered support and training to other areas, not only within the education service, but also across council as well, on the effectiveness of how they provide their support, how they track the changes that they've done and the impact that they're having there as well. So we're sharing that good practice across there, Margaret, so we can ensure that we build on those the starts that they have, the positive starts that pupils are having, so that we don't lose that when they come into schools as well. So yeah, we're trying to build on that.
That's excellent, and I fully appreciate that and know how that, but with the emphasis on secondary, it's not you that will forget, but other areas are sort of forgetting that we have to be just as robust along the way all the time with the age group, the first introduction to school, because all our focus, a lot of focus is going on secondary, and we have to track, because we have to start, look, surely what we're collecting must tell us when things are starting to go wrong, because if we're having those very positive things in the beginning about our children, well, we must track that, because when are things for them identifying themselves and starting to go wrong?
Thank you, Margaret. Yep, no, that reinforces that. Councillor Allard.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, section 4, the first section for this too, there, the impact of actions. It does talk about the impact of actions on the process, etc. But it's the impact of actions on the children that's going through the system is what is key to this. And I know it's at a very early stage now, and Margaret does show the lifetime, of the process, that impact right from the first engagement right through to when the child leaves the system. But you've got Estin conferences. You've had one. It sounds like you've got another one coming up. And I guess there's fairly clear dialogue between yourself and Estin. Are they fairly happy with the approach to date and these measures you're putting into place?
Go on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. If I can come back in on Councillor Ali's point, just first of all, in terms of your observations around the evaluation, you're right. This is a narrative evaluation. In our IBP and CSEP, as you know, we will have those quantitative measures and performance indicators, which will be publicly held to account to, and they are focused on the outcomes of learners. Yeah. Just in response to your point around Estin, we had our Estin Improvement Conference last week. Sorry, time is running away with me. It was last week or the week before. Yes, we had good constructive feedback from the inspectorate of the IBP. They noted a number of strengths, also identified some areas for us to develop around success criteria, and also looking at how our data matrices can inform the quantitative indicators in our plan. But we have a good working relationship with the inspectorate. I work hard to keep them informed of progress, and we have our first monitoring visit ready to be arranged for late in the autumn term.
Okay, so within that recommendation of the report, that Estin conference has happened already then? The one that's
yes, that's right. Yeah, the Estin Improvement Conference.
Okay,
yeah.
And what they came back to you feel quite confident that you can incorporate those suggestions into what you're already doing?
Yes, I do, absolutely. And as a team, we've already started to do that. So we'll be sending a revised version of the plan to the inspectorate before the end of this academic year.
Thank you for your assurance, Richard.
Chair, could I just comment quickly on a point that Margaret made, if I could? Margaret, thanks for your observation about early years. I know ARIG there has responded with how, as a service, we're learning from our early years colleagues. Just for myself, professionally, I've also now started to.
Dr. Richard, we're losing you slightly. While we get you back, we'll go to
my school visitors in Llanelwydd. So I think that would be a really important session for me to see firsthand just the work that goes on in the beginning of a young person's education.
Richard, I think you're going to have to repeat that. You were freezing and very intermittent during that. So
oh, sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It was obviously our connections or whatever. But or was it just me that missed it? No,
it was a few people.
I missed it too.
Everybody missed it, Richard. So have another bash, and then we'll bring Councillor Pete in as well, because I think he wants to respond there as well.
Chair, I was just responding to Margaret's points. I know Eric spoke about the work we're doing within the service to learn from our early years team, but I just wanted to provide some assurance that we're also looking at what's happening in early years settings. And next Wednesday, I'm in the Little Learners in Llanelwydd. I'm seeing for myself firsthand the practice that goes on in that setting and what we can learn and share across early years. So I wanted to make that point because I hope it demonstrates our commitment to early years education.
Thank you, Richard. That certainly helps, Margaret. Councillor Pete, I believe you're indicated when Margaret was speaking as well.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and I'll also pick up on something from Councillor Aled. Margaret, the early years stage and the progression on from it is very important. I just wanted to give reassurance to people that are viewing this that this is not about high schools, this is about all schools. And the teaching and learning, the improvements in practice are being looked at in all parts of the education sector. That's one of the reasons that the plans have been brought forward to the end of this academic year rather than early in the second term, so that officers can evaluate and plan effectively, so that right from the outset at the start of the new academic year, the training is appropriate to schools rather than actually working out what the training is in the first term. In respect of Councillor Allard's comments, I was in the improvement conference last week, as were the leader and deputy. There was quite rigorous challenge from Estin initially about the approach that we're taking of looking at this as an improvement plan across a wider section than just the recommendations, but they accepted the rationale that we put forward, that we wanted to ensure that the service didn't focus on just the 4 recommendations and let other things slip, that we were looking at this as a whole service improvement with focus on what they've identified as weaknesses, but also ensuring that areas that they were less concerned about didn't slip behind and become the areas of concern in the next report. One of the things they did pick up on was the ambitiousness of the September 2026 target. And at the Q1 internal reviews that I had with officers this week, I've asked officers to adopt an agile project management approach to this, looking at each quarter as an agile sprint with particular aims that they've identified that they're then reporting back on at the end of that quarter, so that I have greater assurance that things are moving forward. So there are concerns from Estin there. I agree with Dr. Richard. I believe we will address those concerns, and by adopting this approach, we will start to see clear results coming through because of the focus it will deliver.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. Bore da, Councillor Bryn.
Diolch Cadeirydd, bore da.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning.
Yn mynd nôl at yr
Just
impact
going
of
back
actions oedd
to the actions
Cynghorydd Aled yn cyfeirio
that
atyn nhw.
Councillor Aled was referring to.
Un o'r
One of
gweithredoedd sydd wedi bod
the
yn
actions,
rhywbeth sydd wedi cael ei gweithredu
something
gan
that has
Cyngor Sir
been
Powys
actioned by
ers
Powys County Council
rhai blynyddoedd wrth gwrs
for some
ydy'r
years, of course,
cyllido ar
is
gyfer
the
addysg
financing
cyfrwng Cymraeg yn
for
Powys
Welsh
ac ar y
medium
cyfan wedi bod yn
education in
digwydd mewn
Powys.
ysgolion
And on the whole, it's
dwy
been
ffrwd
happening in
tan yn
dual stream
ddiweddar.
schools
Dwi'n sôn yn y
until
sector uwchradd
recently
unwaith eto, mae'n
in
ddrwg gen
the secondary
i
sector,
ffocysu ar y
really,
sector uwchradd am funud.
and focusing on that for a
Mae 'na
moment.
dystiolaeth
But there
gynyddol
is
gryf yn
increasing
dod
evidence
trwadd
coming through
nad yw'r
that
arian sy'n cael ei
the
roi
money
gan
that
Cyngor
is
Sir
being given
Powys
by
i gyllido
Powys
addysg
County
cyfrwng
Council to
Cymraeg
finance Welsh
yn
medium
ysgolion
education
uwchradd dwy
in
ffrwd yn cael ei
in
defnyddio
secondary
ar
school is
gyfer
not being used
addysg cyfrwng
for
Cymraeg.
Welsh medium
Mae 'na elfen o
education.
dirprwyo dwi'n
There's
deall,
an
ond
element of delegation, I
y lefel mae'n cael ei
understand,
ddargyfeirio
but
iddo
it
yn,
is,
o be dwi'n gweld,
from
yn,
what I can
yn
see,
ddifrifol iawn.
isn't being
Mae
used
un o'r
appropriately, really.
bullet points
One of
yn
the bullet
sôn
points
am
mentions
perthynas broffesiynol
the
rhwng
professional relationship
rhwng yr ysgolion a'r
between
swyddogion
schools
yr
and
awdurdod
officers of the
lleol.
authority, local authority.
Ac mae gen i concern yn
I've
fan
got a
hyn.
concern here.
Mae wedi cymryd 8 mlynedd
It's
efo
taken
fi
8
fel amateur
years
yn
with
tyrchu
myself
trwy'r
as an
wybodaeth i
amateur
dechrau
going through
gweld
the information
y llwybr
to see
i archwilio.
the
Oes 'na ddigon o
audit
bwysau yn
trail.
cael ei
Is there
roi
enough
gan
emphasis being placed
swyddogion y sir
on
ar
officers of the county
sicrhau
on
bod pres ar
ensuring
gyfer
that the
addysg cyfrwng
money
Cymraeg
for
yn
Welsh
cael
medium
ei
education
defnyddio ar
is
gyfer
being used
addysg gyfrwng.
for Welsh medium education? Oh, Councillor Bryn is frozen.
Okay, we'll continue, and we'll assume Bryn has concluded. It's a question perhaps is relevant to our next item as well, but he's justified it into this section, so we'll go to Anwen.
Garan, thank you, Cadeirydd. Is it okay? Chair, shall I answer in Welsh? I don't
Yeah,
know.
please do.
Yeah, ysgwrth yma. Diolch o galon, Cynghorydd
Thank
Davies,
you,
am eich
Councillor
cwestiwn.
Davis, for your
Yn
question,
gwerthfawrogi hynny yn
and I
fawr.
appreciate that
Dwi'n meddwl mae'n rhaid i
hugely.
ni fel
I
awdurdod
think we
lleol
have to, as a
cydnabod
local
yn y lle
authority,
cynta
recognise
efallai nad
that
yw
perhaps
pwyslais digonol
there is
wedi
enough
cael ei roi
emphasis has been
eisoes
placed
o dan y systemau
and
hanesyddol o ran
the
yn union sut mae
historical
ysgolion yn defnyddio y
of
cyllid sy'n
how
cael ei
the schools
ddiwprio.
have used
Fodd
this
bynnag, mi
delegated
fyswn i'n
money.
licio rhoi
And what I'd
cadarnhad i
like
chi o dan y
to
systemau mae
actually
Richard newydd
confirm
trafod arno fo
under what
lle dyn ni'n
Richard has
gweithio'n
just talked
wahanol
about.
fel
We are
tîm
working
gwella
differently
ysgolion.
in the school improvement
Dwi eisiau rhoi
team,
cadarnhad i chi,
and I
mi
want
fyddwn
to
ni fel
ensure
gwasanaeth yn
that
sicrhau fel
we will
rhan o'r
make
cyfarfodydd
sure, as
tymhorol
part of
sydd yn
the
digwydd,
termly
bod
meetings that
ni
happen,
yn gofyn
that we
am y
will be
darpariaeth
asking about the
am yrediad
provision
o pynciau sy'n
and the
cael ei gynnig yn
subjects
ôl
that are
nifer o
being
disgyblion.
offered according to
Mae
the
hynny
number
wedi
of
cael ei adeiladu
pupils.
i fewn i'r
That has
system
been
dyn ni wedi
built into the
datblygu ar gyfer
system
mis
that we've
Medi.
developed
So mi fyddwn
for
ni'n casglu y
September. So
cwricwlwm
we'll
gan ein
collate
ysgolion
the
ni ac yn codi
curriculum
hyn
from our
fel
schools
rhan o'n
and raise
cyfarfodydd
this as
tymhorol.
part of our termly
A dwi'n
meetings.
gwybod, ydy Cynghorydd
I
Bryn
don't know
dal
if
yna?
Councillor Bryn is there.
Councillor Bryn still
I think you've given him the assurance that he needed, really,
Yeah.
but of course we can update him on that. Councillor Pete, I know you want to come in there, but I'm going to hold you off there because there may be some things you can pick up off Councillor Josie and Councillor Angela. I'm quite keen to get this through because we've got some big items to come. Councillor Josie.
Thank you very much. Lots of points that I'd written down that have been covered, Chair, so I won't repeat those. One of my main points here that isn't being discussed, or maybe I've missed it previously, is the current children's and staff well-being. How is that being monitored, please, while we're going through these processes? It's important to myself that we know that the children are feeling that this process that's coming through isn't at a disadvantage to them while they're not included in it. I was just wondering, Chair, if there's anybody that very quickly could come in and discuss perhaps the mental health and well-being of children and staff during this, please.
Thank you, Councillor Josie. I'm gonna continue to Councillor Angela now because I'm feeling that she may ask something similar following the pre-meet that we had. Am I right, Councillor Angela?
Sort of yes, but I've got some other questions as well, if that's all right, Chair.
Do the sort of yes piece first.
Okay, well, we did talk about in the pre-meeting about staff and pupil well-being. We know well-being came out well in the Estin inspection, but obviously this is a programme of change for schools. So yeah, backing up what Councillor Josie says there. And the other one that is of a huge concern to me is our staff's morale. Particularly, there's a feeling, as I think Dr. Richard got a little bit of a hint of that in the conference, of a feeling that the schools don't feel that the local authorities working with them. Now, I welcome this report and what it says. It's actually quite a short report, really, for what's a large and important piece of work. But I welcome the intention and the actions, etc. But could we say, or are we at risk of the schools saying, yeah, it's all very well what you say, but what do you do? You know, what are you doing about it? What is the evidence that this is going to make a difference and that the schools are going to be well supported on that journey?
Yeah. Councillor Peter, you tackle. Okay, Dr. Richard just put his hand up. Councillor Bryn, we realise you froze. We will come back to you. Go on, Dr. Richard.
If Dr. Richard takes the safeguarding and welfare side of things, I'm going to come back on Councillor Bryn's comments.
Okay, I'll thank you. I'll respond to a couple of the observations there made. I think well-being is absolutely high priority for us. We know that if our learners aren't feeling confident, if they're not feeling optimistic in our schools, if they're not feeling excited about their futures, we know that we don't get the best outcomes of our learners and our learners don't enjoy their school experience. For our learners to feel like that, our schools need to thrive and our schools need to feel like vibrant places of teaching and learning. For our schools to feel like vibrant places and thriving places, our school leaders need to also feel like they are making a difference in our schools, that they're being supported to make a difference in our schools by the local authority. I think the well-being and the culture of a school really does filter down from that leadership at all levels within a school. So just moving across to Councillor Angela's point, we are delivering some really strong
we're having real problems today.
Evidence-based messages.
Sorry, you're going to have to repeat that, Richard. Never heard it.
Sorry, Chair. What point did I cut off on?
Yeah, it was evidence-based, I think it was.
Sorry. So I was saying we're bringing strong challenge from a good evidence base. The school improvement paper is an absolute example of that. How do we look after our school leaders as we bring that challenge? Well, we look after them by being really clear in our messaging, which is what we are doing, and we have been since the outcome of our inspection. We're really clear with all of our stakeholders what our messaging is, what our priorities are. Now, some of that messaging lands hard, but we're being open and transparent and confident in sharing that messaging. The feedback that I get from head teachers is that they hugely appreciate.
Okay, we're losing you again, Dr. Richard.
Because people...
You're becoming intuited again. Try it without your camera, Richard. There we go.
Sorry, is that any better?
Let's try. No.
No.
Councillor Pete, step in relation to some of the points that you were answering in, and we'll go back to Dr. Richard when we get him back.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Bryn, Anwen gave you some assurance while you were not here. But one thing I would say is that you did raise your concerns with me in much more detail. And I'm not going to go into that detail today because it would not be appropriate. But what I would say is that the funding is delegated, but schools have a responsibility to deliver what they say they are going to deliver. So a dual stream school should be delivering a dual stream education. So I've had a discussion with officers and they've agreed to come back to me with a report early in the autumn term looking at the use of delegated funding in dual stream schools across the county, with particular reference to the options that are available for English and Welsh medium pupils, so that we as an authority have got the assurance that the dual stream model is actually supporting all of our learners as we move forward. Because obviously now we have 2 Welsh medium schools, we have the consultation just closed on the potential of a 3rd, and we need to be assured as we look at the profile of the school's estate going forward into the future as to be the best means of delivery of English and Welsh medium education in the county, so that all pupils are treated equitably. So I will obviously and probably have to be in confidential session, and obviously once that report is prepared, I'm quite happy to offer it to Scrutiny if they wish to look at it.
Okay, Bryn, I will come back to you. Anwen actually spoke on it as well, and just a quick summary on that is that, you know, she was aware of this, and that the School Improvement Service was acting differently, and we're acting on this as well. So that's a quick summary of what you said, Anwen. You have got your hand up. If you want to come in, please do, and then we'll go back to Bryn, and then we'll try Dr. Richard again.
I put my hand up, Diolch, David. Thank you, Chair. I just filling on Richard's comment, but I will just, so Cynghorydd Bryn,
So
just to
Councillor Bryn, just to confirm, I did acknowledge historically that perhaps as it was delegated, it was an element that was left to be delegated with the governing body. But as we work with the new systems for September, just an assurance that this will be part of the discussions that will be happening, the termly ones, as far as finance, etc. And as
Mr Pete Roberts wedi dweud,
Councillor Pete Roberts just said, we are bringing everything together to see exactly what the offer is, and that paper will come in front of everybody in the autumn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hapus, Bryn?
Diolch yn iawn. Dwi'n
Yes,
falch
thank
iawn
you
bod
very
chi'n
much. I'm
rhoi
very
sylw teilwng
pleased
i'r mater yma,
that you're
achos
given the
ma'
due diligence on this,
o filoedd
because tens of
yn y fantol
thousands
fan hyn.
is actually, can
Ac
just disappear, and
mae addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg yn beryg o
Welsh medium
corff i
education
hynny,
can lose out on that
o'r system yn
from the
ystod y flwyddyn a'r
system
dwy flynedd nesaf.
during the next 2 years. So we need to take action.
Okay, point well made. Dr. Richard, I'm going to come back to you now. Hopefully you're back with us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Dr. Richard, just before you conclude in welfare, I'm keen for Josie and Councillor Angela to have their thing. Sarah's put in the chat, and is something she raised in the pre-meet in relation. This is very linked to recruitment of new teachers as well. So just bearing in mind that when you're in your response, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give it one more go. Sorry, I was making the point about clarity of messages to all of our stakeholders, which we've delivered. Transparency in what we think we need to improve as a local authority, and where we think our schools also need to improve. So we're bringing that. There are some strong messages, but we are delivering them really confidently. We've delivered them in the governing body sessions, in our area heads meetings, and in our recent head teacher conference. So I think it's fair to say where we are in our improvement journey, there will be elements of tension because we are resetting the balance. But a shift is taking place. And I think as long as we communicate clearly and we absolutely keep in mind the learner who's at the heart of it, local authority, our school leaders, our governors and wider partners will be on the same page. I do want to say as well that it's also about celebrating the positives, and we are starting to see some positives come through. So it's about working with our schools to celebrate those positives. But fundamentally, we need to redefine the relationship that we have with our schools so that we get the support level right for us to be able to bring the challenge which accompanies it. And I've been really clear in that messages with colleagues in our schools. Diolch.
Good. Councillor Josie first. Are you content there? And then we'll go to Councillor Angela to see if she's content and she's got some further questions. Right.
Yes, that's fine. Thanks, Chair. My points are being covered as we're going through discussions. I have just made a couple of points in the webinar chat. My actual question really to Dr. Richard was more about how it was monitored, and it wasn't really answered. We went on to Angela's points, which were great, but I just wanted to know how it was that we're all actually monitoring it, because as a mum of 4 Welsh-speaking children here in Llandrindod, I've never been asked, and I'm not aware that my children have. So that was actually my point, was how it is that we're delivering that well-being check on everybody. If that could be answered for me, please, Chair.
Okay. Dr. Richard again.
So much, Chair. So in terms of individual schools, so individual schools would have their pastoral support systems and their wellbeing systems. Individual schools would carry out whole school wellbeing surveys. They would listen to learners in their schools around not just teaching and learning, but also wellbeing. So all schools will have a strong package of wellbeing support and mechanisms to evaluate the effectiveness of that support. Our SIAs, when they go into schools, play a role in that support by calibrating what the offer is and also speaking directly to learners as well. So that school level day-to-day support provided by individual schools for our learners. As an authority, we do authority-wide surveys, Shern survey being an example, where we do gather wellbeing data on the young people in Powys, and we use that data for us to inform our professional learning offer to schools to improve well-being in our schools. There's a key linked piece of work, which I will just share with you as well. We are, as a local authority, developing a council-wide youth engagement strategy. We've got, all of our schools will have really active school councils and curriculum ambassadors, wellbeing ambassadors, Crew Cymraeg as examples. But as a council, we are introducing a authority-wide youth engagement strategy to bring people into the decision-making of the council as well. So that'll be a really important piece of work, because it'll be another way that we will not just gather the voice, but actually act and work with young people to inform policy moving forward. And there will be a wellbeing component to that work too. Diolch.
Diolch, Richard. Back to you now, Angela, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, as I've said previously, I mean, I welcome this business plan, and there's a lot of optimism within it. But I think I have made the point before that we've seen good plans before, and the proof is in the pudding, sort of thing. A question about the authorities we're working with no disrespect to them. So we're working with them because they've been through this process. Can we assume they've come out with really positive results at the other end? So are we being guided by the best advice there is available? Yes, Anwen's nodding, so that's lovely. Thank you very much. There's a talk here in 3.2 about the new data matrix for identifying schools at risk. So how will we know when this works? Where has that come through those schools? Have we made it up ourselves? You know, again, it's this, the proof is in the pudding. How will we know if that work is delivered what we need it to? And then moving on to the skills strategy, we're talking about developing a coherent strategy for literacy, numeracy, and digital skills. I'm just wondering, you know, have we linked in there the impact of ALN? And Simon would be very disappointed if I didn't mention that in a meeting. I will say I've had a meeting with Simon that was really positive, and I'm looking forward to doing some work with him on that matter. But I'm interested in the press at the moment. A number of schools and even a number of authorities are starting to ban smartphones to school. And it was in the press then that Monmouth are asking parents not even to buy smartphones. Now we know there's an impact on children through lack of sleep, too much screen time, and cyberbullying and all sorts of things from smartphones. And I wonder if the authority have had any consideration about the impact of that on children's ability to learn and behaviour, etc. in class.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Angela. Anwen, go on.
Thank you very much. I'll just put my hand down so it isn't there. Thank you, Councillor Davis, for them. So I've tried to make a note as you went through, so I'll try my best. So yes, I did nod around the local authorities we have chosen. So if we start to begin with Ceredigion, no schools there for numerous years in any form of STEM category. So absolutely, without a doubt, a very, very strong local authority. Pembroke has been out of any form of follow-up for quite a few years now, and Torrevine has also recently come out. So there's a range of ones that have not been in any form of category or follow-up in it for a very long time. Ones have been out about 5 years, and ones have been out quite recent. So we've used 3 with a very different aspects because the situations are different. So that there's a little bit of a logic behind how we chose the ones that we have engaged with. So that's it, that gives you reassurances around them. We also have engaged with Newport as well, who've also had a very long-standing track record as well. Your second question is around the data matrix. So at the moment, it's in very, very early stages of development. We hope to be there or thereabouts by September to start sharing it and having those open, honest, transparent conversations with our schools. So what we found is we had all the data, but it was in different locations and held by different parts of the service. So the data matrix is bringing it all together into one coherent central location. And then what we will do, obviously the quantitative data is really easy. to manage. It's the qualitative element of the data that we need to have those open, transparent conversations. And we absolutely will be sharing it with the schools so they know, and we can have those very robust, formal and supportive conversations about, okay, your capacity to improve. And where is the level of support and challenge that you require? So we're working really hard to get that in place ready for September.
Excellent. So my last comment, Chair, if you'll indulge me, is really about how we drive this forward.
Angela, your microphone's not very good, so I don't know if you can do
I'll
anything.
move it.
That's
Is
better.
that better? Okay,
that's
lovely.
better. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'd moved it. So yeah, just the last point I want to make, to be able to deliver this, we absolutely have to work together, don't we? And we have got that sort of relationship that's perhaps not as positive as it could be between the local authority and our schools. So I just want to make that point, that I do recognise that the school service have got to deliver this for the local authority, but it will be the school staff that deliver it on the ground floor, and they need the support of governors. And obviously we need parents and pupils on board as well. But in terms of governors, can I ask, we've had one member development about this, but it is a new way of thinking to some degree. Could they be a regular thing? Because I remind you that whilst you work with this every day, and our schools are working with pupils every day, governors in some cases might only go into schools 2 or 3 times a year. And I think it would be really useful if we're all on the same page, all working to the same goal.
Yes, thank you, Councillor
That's
Davis,
just
for
a
that.
suggestion. Yeah,
Thank you. And just on that one, absolutely around, we recognise it is on the ground is where the changes were made, hence why we will be sharing this openly and honestly, and hope the aim is that it would be shared with governors as well in a governing body meeting, that the heads and if the SIA is present, that they can be discussing where we consider they are, especially that a capacity to improve, and to reassure everybody that element of capacity to improve has come from good practice we identified from the early years team, so there has been some cross learning from each other. I am going to refute that relationships, I think, from compared to where we were a year ago, I think it's recognised, and it was in the Estin report, and the head teachers relationships between us and the local authorities in a very, very better and stronger place than it was historically. But we recognise there's always place to work with alongside our head teachers and the governors of our schools. Your last comment was around smartphones, and of course it's been really interesting in the press recently, but I do know that Richard as director is working really closely with his other fellow directors across Wales and ADU colleagues in order to get a stance as a Welsh as a whole country, if you want, because it's easier coming out as a whole country stance. So I know there's a significant piece of work on that one as we currently speak on an ADU level, which is all of Wales.
Great.
Okay, Jill, thank you.
Thank you. We got Margaret waiting. I've got a question of myself, which I'd like to develop, Councillor Andrews, and I really need to finish this by 11 o'clock, or we won't get through this today. Anwen, I'm really interested to learn, and I did a bit of research on Torfaen and Newport and indeed Ceredigion as well. The one elephant in the room for me is that we've had a strong relationship with Ceredigion and a partnership for some time. And, you know, Ceredigion's outcomes are so different to what we are portraying. I wonder, have we examined why their journey has realised different outcomes when we've been working in partnership with them? You know, it's a stark reality where they are and where we are. And I just wonder, is there any learning to be learned from that?
I think Richard's going to come in.
Go on then, Richard.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. I'll switch my camera off just in case. There is learning to come from that. We have looked at this internally. I think where the difference lies is in Ceredigion, there's a very strong join-up between their professional learning offer for schools and the need in that school. So the professional learning offer is directly providing the support to target a really well-identified area of need. So it's seamless. Here in Powys, we've had a system of dislocation, if you like. The professional learning offer has been dislocated in some parts from the absolute precise need of the school. So there's been a great broad PL offer, but it hasn't directly responded to what our schools need. And I think that is absolutely key to why we haven't seen the traction in Powys that they have seen in Ceredigion. Clearly, we've identified that. I'm saying it, and our new systems and processes, which we're referring to now, will tackle that and address it. There'll be a seamless link between schools development planning, identification of areas of need, and then a very precise brokered support offer documented to meet those areas of need. So I think it's a conversation in itself, but I think the root of the issue is what I've just articulated there.
I think that's a great answer, Dr. Richard. And to me, the very fact that you're aware of it and realise it means more to me than the answer. And I think that's a key to understanding where we are. So thank you very much on that one. Margaret.
I'm just highlighting something that in the past, quite a long time in the past, when we were considering early years and younger children, parents were a part of that. And when things were identified at early stages, other organisations came in to support, and we had they were using an accredited, structured parent programme and inviting parents to take part in this. And I think at that point in time, it had a major impact on the parents and the children that did need support, because it's not just schools. If there are issues, parents are very much part of the process, should be part of the process. I'm just highlighting that, wondering, do we have those sorts of relationships now, and is there anything in place?
Thank you, Margaret. Simon.
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. Thanks, Margaret, and thank you again for championing the early years sector, because you're so right, that early identification, early needs assessment is so important, and if we get that right, then we're setting children up to excel in the future. We still have those kind of programs rolling out, so we still offer the Incredible Years programs, and those are offered out to parents as well. But actually, we've developed much further now. So only last night I was with a group of early years parents, and we were with our health board colleagues as well, and we were discussing ways that we could support families and parents to maybe upskill. And I don't mean that in a derogatory term, but upskill because they don't know certain things. You only know what you know. So we had a very good session last night with parents. We've developed a early years frequently asked questions documentation, and we co-produced that with parents. So parents who have been through the system and have had these questions, they've helped us to produce this document, so in the future other parents don't have the same kind of questions. We've also worked on things like letter wording, so looking at how the language we produce in letters helps parents so they can understand what we actually mean instead of using technical jargon. We understand it because we use it every day, but parents might not. So we're very much going down that co-construction, co-production route with parents, particularly early years as well, and those with lived experience. So very much work developing, but continuing with those programs, as you mentioned, Margaret.
And parents are happy you can get parents engaged with that easily.
Absolutely, the parents have been absolutely fantastic. They've given up their time freely. They've even recorded videos for us to kind of describe their journeys. So we've been able to use them as case studies as well. So it's been a great collaboration with parents.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Margaret. Okay, I think we've had a good discussion on this, and we'll move to item 7, which is any recommendations in relation to item 6. Anything that we need to highlight, or are we content in the progress that has been made? Councillor Angela.
Yeah, I would like to make that recommendation that that members have a regular member development session to remind us how this is working, what we're supposed to be doing as local authority governors, and what is happening. So not just coming to learning skills, but coming to the full council.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and obviously we will need another report at some time to know all these new initiatives are being set up, the matrix, etc. Like, will we have another scrutiny session in 6 months' time, or how's it working?
My understanding is that we'll be looking at different objectives in quarterly sections.
Yeah.
You feel that this should be done with full council involvement as well?
Well, not looking at the documents in the scrutiny way, but just reminding us as governors, local authority governors, how we can use this new documentation, this new way of working within our role as governors.
Okay, yeah, we'll make a recommendation in relation to the clarity on that. Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, gawn ni just
Can
cefnogi
I
yn
just
gryf
support
ymchwiliad
strongly
ma' nhw'n gwneud i'r sut mae
the
gwariant ar
investing on
addysg
the
cyfrwng Cymraeg yn cael ei
expenditure of
ddefnyddio.
money for Welsh medium education?
Yeah. I'm not saying we don't make that recommendation. Would it be better made in the next agenda item?
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. It's slightly drifting. It's slightly drifting away from the objective of this report, isn't it? But yeah.
I got it.
Yes, I'll raise it again.
Councillor Josie.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if the date that I scribbled down here, which I believe was September 2026, was a little bit of an ambitious target. There seems to be a lot still going on. Are we likely to meet that?
Councillor Peat did make a comment about Esting. We're encouraged about the ambition and the timescales.
I think that should be noted. Quite.
Okay, that's fair game. Kath, you're going to probably come in and tell me now that the comment was made in this section and the recommendation needs to come in this section.
I was, Chair. Yes, we can also put it in the next section as well. I just wanted to make sure that the whole committee were happy with those recommendations.
Yeah, everybody happy?
No. Great.
Sounds like.
Thank you.
Anything else to be added? Okay, we'll move on to, I'm sorry, I appear to be rushing a little bit today, but I'm conscious of the fact that we've got a lot to get through, and I really don't want to go beyond 12:30 if we can help it. Item 8 on the agenda is school out-town reports. Obviously, a lot of documentation surrounding this. I'm assuming is Nancy in the room?
I am, Chair.
Yeah, I'm assuming, Nancy, you're going to take us through this, but I'm going to be bold and ask councillors, do you want Nancy to give an introduction to this, or do you want to go straight to questions?
Straight to questions.
Straight to questions? Would that be all right with you, Nancy?
Yeah, if Councillor Peat and Councillor David are content with that as well. I know they're here as well.
Yeah, so Councillor Peat, if we go to you as an introduction, or Councillor David, whoever feels better, and we will go straight to questions. I know, Nancy, you did introduce this in the school budget forum, but I think a lot of that information which you'll share with us, we will already know. So, Councillor Peat, if you'd like to introduce this, and we'll go from there.
Certainly, I'll keep it brief because you say we've got a very busy agenda. The report before you outlines the position of the school outturn at the end of the 2024-2025 financial year. The background gives you the details of the initial costs that came through and how that has moved forward. At section 3, we've got the outturn reports, and table 1 gives you a detailed summary there. I draw your attention to 3.3, which highlights again we have had Welsh Government funding and by way of grants come through very late in the day, which has altered that position. Moving onward, we've got section 4, which is looking at the ratified budget position. You'll see within that at 4.7 that there were 10 schools that are required to submit a budget recovery plan by the 30th of June. I've checked with officers before this meeting. I can confirm to you that has now come down to 1 school that is still outstanding in respect of that. You've had the documentation. I don't propose to prolong this, and I welcome questions from members of the committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pete. Members, if you weren't in the pre-meet, just a bit of guidance in relation to this. Obviously, there's a lot of detail and whatever. We will be going into confidential session at item 10. This will give an opportunity for us to deep dive and learn about deep dives, but also we can be able to speak openly about detail in the document which may be relevant to individual schools. So just be careful when you're in this session now in your question, and please have a generic overview of it, but please don't deep dive into schools at this point, if that's okay. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I start by asking some questions I've picked up from the papers that went to the finance panel on Wednesday, and they are pertinent to this meeting. I note from that there was an underachieved saving of 386,000 from the School Improvement Learning Service, and I wouldn't mind having some information around that. But my main point is that the figures in that paper on table 3 around the opening balances, the in-year use of reserves, and don't appear to be the same as we got in this paper today. And I was wondering which is correct. It seems to be around primary schools.
Okay. Anybody got any clarity on that? Anwen.
Diolch, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Jones, for your question. If I can answer the first half of your question around the unachieved savings, that one is still ongoing, mainly around our staffing restructure. Clearly, when Estin called us in February, it really put that element of restructure.
No, sorry to interrupt, Anne. This is last year's savings.
Oh, right.
It's unachieved by 386,000.
Yeah,
Give me a second.
Can I come in?
Oh, thank you, Councillor Roberts.
This relates to the decision not to go ahead with the proposal to merge the pupil referral units from 2 sites into 1. Following this,
I thought we were given the assurance that saving would be achieved from within the service during the year.
No, the either in the Q1 or the Q2 report, there was a virement from reserves to cover part of that, but the service were looking to mitigate as much of that as possible. And if you look at the savings in the report to the finance panel, they were able to mitigate a substantial chunk of that in year, with the rest of the work moving forward as part of the ALM review.
I do note that there is a underspend on the service in the year in cumulative, but I just want to around those identified then. And then the point around the opening balances, the opening and in your balances on schools.
Let's just close up your first point, Gareth. I think Nancy's coming in.
Yeah, just in relation to the first point, yeah, I know when we spoke about this at Scrutiny in budget setting, there was a virement done of 120,000 in respect of moving money around to mitigate the PRU saving the service put forward, and then that was dealt with in relation to the council's budget setting process in 25-26, where that amount was removed. However, the service then still reviewed that saving. I've got savings in 25-26 and in 26-27 in relation to that, in relation to the strategy. So that's where that saving is in relation to the pupil referral unit.
Thank you, Nancy. Gareth, your second point.
Second point was that the opening balances and in the year use of reserves for the primary sector seems to be different between the report that went to the finance meeting on Wednesday and today's.
I'll need to double check that, Councillor Jones, if that's okay, and come back to you.
Yeah, I just wonder. There is. I think the cumulative at the end of the year is the same, but there seems to be something around opening and closing. And
it could be to do with some closed schools that we would have had during the year, but I will check that and come back to you if I can.
No, it's not school. I think it's something to do with primary.
Okay, I'll have a look. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for those points. Members, more questions? I know Councillor Alley does have to drop out for a minute.
Well,
Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, well, it's in order for a recommendation to be come from the group. I just like to raise the point made earlier that we support an investigation into how the money allocated for Welsh medium education is actually spent in the dual stream schools.
Okay, make the point. I don't know, Anwen, just for clarity and to help Bryn out with this, would you like to give your answer to that, which you gave previously?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I look a bit distracted. I'm trying to get Ysgol Llanfallin in as we speak, but hopefully I'm just in time. Sorry. Yeah, diolch Cynghorydd Davies am hynny. So just to reassure everybody, Councillor Pete did reiterate there is a paper coming forward where in the autumn term where we will have collated all the options across our Key Stage 4 and 6 for discussion in the autumn term, but I did acknowledge that perhaps historically, because it is delegated and it is down to the school and governing body, that perhaps this wasn't given the full attention. However, reassurances with our new system for SIAs and involvement in all elements of the school work, they do attend the termly finance meetings, and it will be an expectation as part of that we do look at the breadth of offer in the curriculum offer as part of those meetings. So it's a little bit too late for this September because timetable's already set. However, reassurances that we'll keep on looking at this for future curriculum plans.
Thank you. Councillor Gareth again.
Yeah, I welcome that, but I'm a bit concerned if that is just focusing on Welsh medium. I think it should be a full across the board, especially around ALN, SEN. I've got significant issues, and we'll know I've done a lot of work around a primary school that I'm involved in, and I'll talk about it more perhaps in the confidential session. But I think we need to do a full assessment of where we're funding and where we're spending.
Agreed, and it will be happening as part of our formula review, which is undertaken at the moment, ready for budget forum and consultation in the autumn term.
Thanks, Anwen, Gareth. Councillor Angela.
Chair. Yeah, so looking at the table here of all the schools and their budget positions, it's something we've talked about in other meetings where we're very good at supporting departments or individual schools or whatever to come out of a sort of negative situation, but then we seem to struggle to keep them on the straight and narrow. In this case, we're talking about schools, and you can see there that the budget sort of plans seem to go black, red, black, red, black, red. And there seems to be overall that we have increasing numbers of schools struggling with their budgets. And have you done any work to sort of look into the themes? What are the main drivers of that? As a governor, we only really have staffing, don't we, that we can make any real big changes within our schools. So your thoughts on that, please.
Can I come in there, Chair?
Yeah, come on, please.
Yeah. So, there's a number of things in relation to school budgets. I think, Councillor Angelis, worth noting when you are looking at the Appendix A, we will talk about, I'm sure, come on to surpluses at some point, but, schools are required to look at, spending that surplus in requirement with the regulations that are in place and providing statements to the local authorities as to how they intend to spend those surpluses. Some schools, will have pupil number changes that factor into their budget plans. What we try to do when we meet with those schools is ask them to plan as far ahead as they can with the indicative information that they've got. So we try to always push schools to ensure that we've got the most up-to-date pupil numbers from them, so they're working to the best possible funding indications that we've agreed as a local authority, and then ask them to look at ways of tackling those deficits in future years. So, for example, the schools we've got on the appendices, we've got a variety of options where there's schools in surplus. They've been asked to provide statements to the local authority. We've got schools with cumulative deficits that we've asked for recovery plans by the 30th. We don't just stop there. We look ahead into the future. We look at the 26-27 balances and 27-28, because the scheme asks all schools to plan 4 terms in advance of entering into a deficit.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that. And I'm just wondering then, how realistic are the budget plans that schools submit going forward? So do we have a look, this is what we planned 3 years ahead. Do we look back and see, well, did they hit those targets? How realistic are the plans, or are we just making the figures look right on paper?
I think there's a big push from the finance department, working with the education service and HR colleagues, who I know are here today as well, to make sure that we're using information like the previous year's outturn. So the team in the finance meetings that we have with the schools would be actually looking at last year's outturn position and challenging a school as to whether they have got appropriate budgets looking forward in place. We do that with the secondary as well. We'll look at the year end now, look at their outturn position, and we'll ask them then if there's any highlights and variances that we're picking up that would cause a question on their future year's budgets that they've set. We're picking those up with those individual schools. And I just want the committee to note in the report as well that this year we actually have asked schools where there are variances at year end to a degree to come back to us to confirm why those variances are there, because like I say, we do need open communication and collaboration between the school and our finance team, who provide that service level agreement support, to make sure that we get that information from the school. And if we're spotting things as well, we raise those with the school as well. And it's not just twice yearly, that's a service level agreement, but we're in contact with our schools a lot more than twice yearly. I think it's fair to say.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, because I've seen one.
So Margaret,
I think I've got mixed up. But
Margaret, I think we're picking up some background noise from yourself.
Yes, sorry, I just gone through the figures. I see that Asco Borough Council has got a proposed overspend in 26-27. And I thought it's closing now at the end of this term.
Yeah, it's timing of the report, Councillor Gareth, in that respect, in terms of when the report is written and the decisions that were made then during that period. So that will need to be updated going forward. That school in particular actually was put on immediate spending restrictions before the decision was made because of the cumulative deficit projected.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to come in here now. Obviously, a lot of red in the tables, which signifies a lot of distress for school. And please shut me down if I'm wrong, but we're 2 million in the red at the end of this forthcoming year, which I acknowledge is in a better position which we were 12 months to now. But the long-term goal places us at 8 million in the red. And well, not the long-term goal, sorry, that's the wrong words. The outcome of these tables is that we'll be 8 million in the red at the conclusion of this term, which is 27-28. It continues to be worrying, and we acknowledge the work and the efforts that have been made, but it's clear that there is distress out there in meeting the school budgets. I'm not sure how we continue without any different action taking place, really, because I personally don't see how schools can get there. And the other point to be made, there's some long-term schools which are struggling to make any inroads into deficits. I really feel for them, really, because I don't know how they will ever achieve. I acknowledge that there are in-year budgets working, but if we look at the 27, 28, and I repeat, it's £8 million. I don't know how to word it any different, really. It's distressing. Nancy?
Yeah, just I understand obviously Councillor Gwynfor about the red on there, and obviously there's some large cumulative deficits there in a few schools that make up that total. But I would just ask that when we're looking at the red elements and the in-year position, that we do take into account that those schools that are predominantly in the primary sector holding surpluses, that they have been asked to look and review and utilise working with the school improvement team for the benefit of the current learners as to how they then utilise that surplus over the next few years. We want to work with the schools to look at how they manage those balances, and ultimately the authority could direct a school to spend a surplus if it's in excess of 50 and 100, as per the regulations. But it's about working with the school improvement team in the school to ensure they're utilising that money for the current learners and for any improvements required at the school, really, for the learner experience in that respect. And then with regard to the overall position, I think there have been improvements, like you say, Councillor Gwynfor, since we sat here last year, significant improvements, and we are stabilising, and schools are stabilising, particularly in some of the secondary sectors where there are large deficits. The in-year position is stabilising, and as a local authority, we need to ensure that we've got delivery from our schools on the in-year positions that they're putting forward, so that we hold those deficits and then look at a period of time of payback. And for some of them, they are large, significantly large.
Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, sorry, I seem to be dominating this. Can I take you back to section 6.8 in the report, where the head of finance comes that the council has provided sufficient budget for the principal school funding formula? Either that statement isn't true, or the formula is not working correctly in my mind, because as a vice chair of and chair of finance committee of a small primary school, we cannot get our budget to balance. And Nancy and Anne know that, and we are working hard to try and find. We're lucky we've got a significant surplus carried forward, so that's a point, and I think that's a key issue that the schools funding formula review group needs to look at. The second point is, if you look, yesterday we approved the strategic equality plan and the KPIs within that. Within that document, there's 4 or 5 KPIs that say all schools will set a balanced budget. And I think that is ignoring the fact, as Nancy's just said, schools are legitimately allowed to use their reserves carried forward. Therefore, I would propose, and a recommendation in this group, that we should look at changing those KPIs so that all schools should be setting a cumulative surplus at the end of the financial year and not an in-year surplus.
Okay, that's a point well made. Any comment on that? Councillor David, Councillor Pete, whoever's first in.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm to Councillor Gareth that we did fund the funding formula fully last year, and indeed we funded up to the level of the integrated business assessment, that integrated indicator-based assessment that came down from Welsh Government. In actual fact, if you include the allocation for post-16, we invested £93.9 million into the dedicated budgets. And if you compare that to previous years, the last 3 budgets, we've actually invested over £21 million, and the 3 budgets before that, it was £11.1 million. So this cabinet has invested significantly in schools. And what we will be doing this year, similar to last year, the service will bring a report towards I think it'll be just in November last year for consideration by Cabinet of any amendments that might be made to the funding formula, etc., etc. And if Cabinet accept those as being fully evaluated and effective in delivering improved teaching and learning to schools, then obviously we'll fund to that level again. But it's important to realise that at the end of the day, you know, we're not in a position to just turn around and say that, oh, we can invest another £2 million into schools. The base budget wouldn't be able to do that. But what we can do, we can apportion extra money to schools as long as we've got effective evidence to show that there's going to be significant improvement there. And what I will say about this report that's come out of the school service, there's some real positives in this, because to me, it is showing that the strategy that's been adopted by the service is working. We've got significant number of schools. I think it's 60 odd schools, you know, that are actually coming in with balanced budgets in year. There's improvements in the cumulative budgets going forward. There's significant work to be done, particularly in the secondary sector. I wouldn't argue any different on that. But the point I'm trying to make is that we can't address that simply with a cash investment of millions of pounds. It's got to be measured. It's got to be effective. It's got to be evaluated, and we will take all that into consideration. But just to make the point, going back to Councillor Gareth's original question, the funding formula was fully funded last year.
Councillor Pete.
Yeah, I'm just going to build a little bit on the funding formula moving forward. As you all know, it's developed as a collaboration between the school service and all the different sectors within the school's estate. Last year it brought a settled formula forward, and the deep dives and timetabling reviews that we'll hear more about in the confidential session reached the point where officers were able to say that the formula and the work done by the schools should be able to deliver a balanced budget in almost all schools, maybe not in the first year, but within the relevant window. As an authority, as a cabinet, we fully funded that, but it is becoming clear. Councillor Gareth has spoke to me a number of times about one particular school that he's involved with, and others as well have identified challenges within their budget. So at the end of this structure, now that officers have got down to the point where schools have got their budget set, there will be a review, as there always is, with suggestions coming to that forum about how the formula can be tweaked to look at and meet the challenge of particular things that are emerging. And I know, Councillor Gareth, ALN in small schools and how the figures work there can be a challenge. And I believe Anne identified a couple of other areas that she was exploring around the secondary sector, which I haven't checked in with you for a couple of weeks on that. But if you're in a position to share those with the committee, either now or in confidential session, I'm sure they would welcome that.
Thank you.
Can I come in confidential, because obviously we're still working on it and ready for full consultation in the autumn term. So
thanks, Diolch. Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just thinking about these figures. I take on board what Councillor David has said about the funding formula. You know, there is a formula there and that's it. I don't suppose there'll ever be a situation where all schools are happy with how the funding formula goes. And I know it's complicated. You can't just compare like with like. But looking down this list of schools, it would be useful or interesting to know, you know, how big they are. Small, medium or large schools, for example, you know, does that make a difference on the outcomes? You know, we think of economies of scale, but is that true? Does that relate in schools? And of those schools that have got large positive balances, the word's gone out of my head for positive, but anyway, what are their outcomes for their pupils? Are they actually spending enough money on their pupils' offer and education, as opposed to perhaps those with a negative budget situation are getting better results? You know, we don't know actually, do we? And I wonder if there's ever been any linking up of the two things. So it would be interesting to have this chart with some indication of the school size and some indication of its pupil attainment. And what is the link to the finances?
I think that's a really good point on both points there. It's something which I know finance panel are very keen to explore in relation to outcomes and standards. So it'd be interesting to see if there is a piece of work to be done there, which could be included in this, which would give us a better picture of where our schools stand. You know, we as school governors continue to express the view that we're having to stress to try and meet the school budget. So be interesting to make them assumptions in relation to pupil numbers and standards.
And could I, sorry, Chair, and I would add to that in terms of the high school, the offer.
Okay, curriculum choice, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that something that officers think that we could develop at some point, or create a working group to examine that further? Nancy?
I don't know if Anwen wants to come in there, Chair, on the outcomes and the standards as such.
Thank you. So, Chair and Councillor Davis, thank you very much for those comments. Yes, I think that's something we can absolutely look at, trying to pull it all together so that you can match budgets, outcomes, and number on roll together. So, if you would bear with us, we'll try and work on that ready for the autumn term.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely great. But maybe there is a working group, joint working group between finance panel and learning and skills, which may help you in that journey as well. So, Councillor Angela.
And I suppose I'd like to add into that with regards to the high schools, the post-16 situation, because you know we're having to have a review at the moment to look at how we deliver that, and there's going to be financial implications for the authority really in whatever we do there. So I just think these things all need to be linked, because ultimately what everything we should be talking about is our pupils and what they achieve at the end of their school life, and that's it at the end of the day, isn't it, regardless of everything else.
Okay, good. Nancy?
Councillor Gwynfor, would it be appropriate for me to come in just to pick on Councillor Garrett's point about the question he had around the appendix and the tables and finance panel?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so just to confirm to the committee that the tables include an opening balance of 891,000. That was for the schools that were open at the time the last report was compiled. The appendix excludes those schools that have now since closed, and therefore that is the difference under the primary element that Councillor Gareth was raising, just to confirm to the committee.
Thank you. Okay. Yep, Gareth, content with that?
Yeah, I'm more than content with that.
Good.
Chair.
We're speaking about schools with large deficits. When do they become a risk for the authority?
3 years ago. Or longer.
Nancy?
I'm hoping Mary as well, Chair, might come in, perhaps Anwen on this. But, you know, like I said before, we have got a few schools that make up in large part that deficit. And again, I'm going to have to say it's coming back to stabilising that and keeping on with the work that has been done in real collaboration with our schools. Our schools work really well with us in Powys. There is good support and healthy challenge around the table. And like I say, once we go into the confidential session, perhaps we can explore that a bit more. But, you know, the balance is on here. There is further work to do, as Councillor David touched on, particularly in the secondary. But, you know, with Anwen and the service there's a lot of work going on with regards to the curriculum elements. I don't know, Anwen, I'll bring you in now if you don't mind. Otherwise, I'll overstep.
Just before you come in, I'm just a thought really, because we're looking at these, you know, this is one picture at one time when we look at these tables. Do you think it should be documented how long these deficits have existed for? Because we have a responsibility to the public and our parents and in effect our pupils really. And looking at this today, it doesn't really reflect how long these deficits have been in place. And I think perhaps we need to communicate that as well. We've got Anwen and Councillor James coming in.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Can I just come in very, very quickly? I think that's a very, very important point, and I don't want to name an individual school, but this is a positive one. Everybody knows the historic pattern of cumulative deficit at Brecon High School, but because of the very, very rigorous work we've been doing there recently, and the school working very, very positively with us, we are in a situation where they're predicting for the first time in a very long time in-year surplus budget. So it's we describe it as turning a tank around. It's managing the situation in year first in order to halt the ever increasing cumulative deficit. But I think Ysgol Aberhonddu Brecon High School is a very case in point, and it was recognised in their most recent monitoring visit by Estyn as well around the work the school had done around their budget. So it's a long term. It's not something we can turn around as councillors and as schools improvement and as schools overnight. We've got to turn the tide in the in-year element, and then year by year then a look at the cumulative deficit. So it's that turning that tank around is the most important part of this role.
Yeah, that's great, and I think their projected balance does reduce by 400,000 in 27-28, I think, doesn't it? So yeah, it is positive news. But just on that timescale, that Brecon, we've mentioned Brecon, so we can continue to speak about Brecon. That sat there for a very, very long time. So I think that should be recognised in the report, because it would help us to identify any new schools going into distress. Yeah. So I think something in relation to timescales would be good. Councillor James.
Chair, thank you very much. Just because the post-16 funding issue has been mentioned, I thought I ought to come in here. I think it's a really important, Angela and to a degree David raised this, and I think it's a really important point about, in the current work that we're now doing on reviewing the post-16 system, that we understand how the insertion, if you like, of the grant for post-16 into the single school's delegated budget, what impact that has on the outturns for each individual school, and what would happen were we to remove that grant, if you like, from the single school's budget. It'd be really interesting, actually. I don't know whether it'd be interesting, and I don't know whether it's possible to do it, really, is if you were to remove the post-16 grant element from each individual secondary school's budget, what impact that would have on their deficit position or their surplus position, depending. But in the secondary sector, it's more or less entirely deficit. So, because it is a fact that to sustain small sixth form requires some degree of cross-subsidisation, but we don't really know how much it requires, and it will vary from school to school depending on what they're delivering and so on and so forth. And of course, now with the consortium model, pupils are moving from school to school. And again, so it's a really difficult and complex issue to disaggregate that spending from the pre-16 phase spending. But I think we're going to have to try and understand that better before we come to any decisions, when we get through the whole engagement and consultation process. But I do think that there has to be some impact. And in my view, to sustain a small sixth form, it must have a negative impact on the pre-16 spend and must have an impact on the overall balance position of the schools. But I think we need to understand very carefully what that is as part of it. And I think if a recommendation could come from the committee that we look at that, I think that would be really helpful, actually.
Thank you, James. I'm coming back to you, Councillor Ansler.
Just wanted to add to your point there about the schools with the long-term deficits, and we're talking about Brecon. It's been discussed at length before, and the challenge that they've got. But there are new schools with budgets almost as similar positions, snapping on their heels, that don't have that historical deficit and yet are still struggling to balance their budgets. And we've got a brand new school there in this list that is in a deficit position. So it's not a simple question to ask or to answer. But the one thing I did want to ask, because Nancy talked about all the work that the local authority do, the team around the schools, and she commented that schools do work well with the local authority. So I was pleased to hear that. But how do we balance that with the comments made by Councillor Jones earlier about some schools who've had all those meetings and conversations and working with the local authority and yet still can't balance their budget? So I just don't know really what else we do or what else schools are supposed to do there. That's
Yeah, it's a good point. I've got Mary with her hand up and Nancy, so I'm going to go to them before. So Mary, welcome to the meeting. Before I go to Councillor Gareth, I think your point is examines the dilemma that is out there, Councillor Angela. Mary.
I just wanted to address your question really around the risk, and at what point the risk from some of these deficits, how much of a risk it is to the authority, and there's no doubt these deficit budgets would ultimately be a risk to the authority, and that's why we put so much energy and resource into sort of supporting schools with that, both from school service and from the finance side, and with those team around the school meetings, but also why we keep such a close eye on the balances as well, and make sure that there's sort of like that review of where they're going. There's quite a robust monitoring system in place that between the school's finance team and school service as well, on a monthly basis, looking at those balances, so we can see what the trends are, where schools are the direction that schools are going in as well. So I just wanted to come back on that point, really. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Thank you, Mary, for that clarification. That certainly helps me with that. Nancy.
There's just two things for me, Chair. One was obviously, I know we've touched on the formula review and how we operate within the overall budget available to us across the different sectors. And there's often changes to that during the course of the years. We've always actually reviewed our formula very regularly. And the other point really in respect to Councillor Angela is just touching on, with deficits and how we approach them is obviously first and foremost working as closely with the school as possible with that support and challenge. But the authority has got, powers of intervention. So we can escalate effectively up to a notice of concern. And we did issue a notice of concern, as it's mentioned in the paper, in autumn. And that's worked really well. And we've refreshed warning notices and updated them as well during this last year. And we'll take stock now of the balances and the recovery plans that have been submitted by schools. But we're also using our spending restrictions that we can within regards to the scheme, and using the deficit agreements, which links back to the scheme for financing schools, which allows a local authority to impose certain terms and conditions on schools that are in deficit. So that is increasing in terms of the schools that are in deficit, and putting spending restrictions in place where officers like myself and IRIG here today as service manager, and Anwyn have requests from schools prior to doing any staffing amendments or variations or entering into contracts. So there are other options available to us, Councillor Angela, but the first and foremost is to really work well and work through it with the school as far as we can.
No, thank you, Nancy. I'd just like a bit more clarity on like we've got 21 in deficit and 18 unlicensed. That suggests that they're really, really struggling. So just give me a bit of clarity or a bit of confidence in those unlicensed budgets.
Yeah, I think it, Councillor Gwynfor, it has come down from last year by a couple of schools where we started, but more so, I think, in that section where we talk about the actual breakdown of the schools, we've actually written to 10 of the 18 left over there, because the other ones we have been working with, and they have got in-year surpluses. So I think it's looking at, we have got larger deficits like we've discussed during the course of the meeting, but for me, it's first and foremost working with education service to stop those deficits. So we've got schools where we have halted that position, and that's why we're writing out to 10, where some of those did have actually in-year underspends, but because we want to be really robust with them as to why they'd gone into deficit, what were the reasons, what is the length of time that we think is reasonable working with the education service that they can pay that back. And, and schools can go into deficit for any manner of reasons, which I'm sure we'll explore in the next session. But, you know, we are only writing out to 10 now for 25-26, and we were writing out for a lot more this time last year for future years as well. That's reduced as well. So, you know, I think that's a positive of where we are currently. And I think, you know, there are some work to do, even with the schools that have got in-year underspends, and how we look forward with them. But I think we've got a really good starting point in what we've received. And I know from the balances that we've received so far from the current recovery plans, we're seeing a real positive approach to the challenge put to submit a recovery plan by the 30th for those schools as well. So it's 10 of the actual 21 altogether, where we're going back out and saying we need some further work being done by you.
Okay. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. 12 months ago, I was the lead member on a review of leisure services, and part of that, we had a presentation from a manager within the school where it ran its own leisure services. I'm not going to mention the school. I asked at the time what the cumulative financial position was, and I believe it was running at a deficit. Can I ask, are those figures for any businesses run by a school included in these reserves?
Can I come back in there, Chair? No, they are not, Councillor Gareth. They are kept under the Education Services non-delegated functions, as we call them. They sit alongside all the after-school clubs, early years settings. They're kept out of the school budget.
So I think, Chair, it would be good if we had a summary of those reserves, because obviously the responsibility for them would rest with the governing body at some stage if they're run by the school or under the control of the school.
Okay. Yeah, no, I understand that we can drag that out in our recommendations or observations. Councillor Pete.
Yeah, and there was a question around historic figures, and I've taken the time while the discussion has moved on to try and find some figures from before COVID. I'll try to send them across and drop the link in the chat, but I found the outturn report from 2020, which included in it a similar table to this one. In 2020, the total for primary, there was a cumulative surplus of 2.645 million. In the secondary, because this was before we had all age schools, there was a cumulative deficit of 3.432 million. And at that point, there were only 2 secondary schools were actually showing a surplus, whereas we've got 1 showing at the moment. So I think those that are concerned about historic deficits are right to identify that. And it is something we need to look at potentially in the confidential session, or potentially in a longer term with a paper coming through that will trace the changes, because I'm aware that during the COVID years we had this major influx of grant funding, which, just as we saw grade inflation in the schools, it muddied the waters in terms of school budgets and school deficits, cumulative deficits for a couple of years.
Thanks, Councillor Pete. I'm going to say, Councillor Angela, last point in this session.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It is my last point.
Not to you, to everybody.
But you would all be disappointed if I didn't ask what the impact of our pupils with ALN is having on our school budgets. I am certainly aware of schools that are employing extra staff to help in the supported delivery of ALN support for children, and the frustration by schools that the process for having reviews for children is too slow. Now, to be fair, as I said earlier, I've had a meeting with Simon. We've had a very good discussion on this, and I won't say optimistic. Optimistic. I'm optimistic that there's a piece of work that we can do on this, but I think it's important to put it on the record here that our schools believe the numbers of ALM pupils is having an impact on their budgets, and I wonder what school service feel about that.
Anybody? Simon.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Angela, and thank you for meeting with me earlier. It was a real positive discussion. And I think you're right. We know there's a national crisis with ALN, and the need for ALN is increasing. The complexity of need is increasing, and our schools are on the front line dealing with that. So it is something very much we are aware of and we are taking into consideration. And it's not just ALN needs, it's health needs as well. And we need to be looking at how we're supporting schools with that as well. So they're not using ALN delegated funds necessarily to support primarily health needs too. So that's work we're working with our health board colleagues on, and working with our schools too. But it is a real point to raise. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Oh, Councillor Allen, you're back in the room. Go on then, Councillor Allen.
Apologies, Chair. And I just put it in the chat. I can't remember where I saw the stats that there was a 10% roughly drop in staffing numbers across the school sector. Slightly high, I think it was slightly high in secondary, slightly lower in primary. I was just wondering that the impact of that on options available at GCSE stage. Thank you.
Anwen.
Thank you, Davis. Thank you very much. We've just committed for a paper in the autumn term, Councillor Davis, where we will collect the curriculum plans from all our schools, where you can match their budgets and their curriculum offer in English and in Welsh for you to see that overview across all our schools. So that will be available towards mid to end of the autumn term.
Diolch, Anwen, that'll be helpful.
Diolch.
Thank you. Members, I'm going to bring this debate to an end only because obviously we can ask similar questions in our next session as well, which will go. Would it be appropriate to leave recommendations at this stage and do recommendations when we finish our private session as well? I think there'll be a certain overlap. So everybody in agreement with that? If that's the case,
sorry, Chair, just on that. How will they be shown then in the minutes? Would the ones from this session be shown?
Okay. Yeah, we would have to go back into private. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's do recommendations. So let's move to item 9, Scrutiny Committee recommendations to Cabinet in relation to school outturn reports. The one recommendation which Anwen has already spoke about is creating a paper in relation to outcomes, connections with pupil numbers, teacher numbers, etc., etc. There was also a suggestion of finance panel and maybe Learning and Skills formed a working group to do a piece of work on this as well. So should we add that to that recommendation?
Yeah, there's also the recommendation that Bryn had about doing an activity-based costing exercise with funding versus expenditure, and I think Bryn was mentioning Welsh medium, but I think that needs to be extended to include ALN, SEA, and as Councillor James has just said, post 16.
Yep. Councillor Angela.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. That piece of work needs to be broader to cover all those different elements. Yeah.
Great minds, Angela.
Let's leave that comment there. Anything else? We had quite a discussion in relation to this.
Yeah, in accepting those recommendations, they need to be looked at. Can we recognise that ALN and the other things you mentioned are also part of the Welsh medium education system? They need to be, and I don't know whether they should all be in one report or they should be parcelled up. What will give us most clarity? But I guess it's up to the officers to some extent, to make sure that's those aspects are all addressed, not entirely separately. We can't have ALN separate to Welsh medium. It's because ALN has to be part of Welsh medium as well. That kind of.
Recognise your point. I think as long as the recommendation is there, that we need to allow officers to develop that, don't we, Councillor Gareth?
Yeah, and I think Bryn is right, but it's a significant piece of work because I've just done it for one school and that took quite a while. Can I just add another one? I was just being a governor at a school, and for my benefit, it'd be useful to have that historical information around the balance, the cumulative balance at the end of each of the last 3 or 4 years. So you can actually see how that balance is increasing or decreasing, and what work does, and where the key changes.
Yeah, no, I'd be content with that. And I mentioned about timescales and long-term deficits, etc. So that if we had a table like that, it will identify where there is new schools with distress. Anything else there? No. Right, we'll move to item 10. Members, I'm looking for somebody to propose that we go into confidential session.
Happy to propose,
Councillor
Chair.
Gareth, and seconded. We just for information, the proposal is to go into confidential session so that we don't prejudice any school in our discussions, and give us an opportunity to discuss more freely some of the deficits and items in the paper. Kath, I'm happy for you now to suspend the recording or finish the recording.